Softly above Sarah Thompson as she entered the bustling hospital, the familiar hum of activity wrapping around her like a well-worn blanket. It was early morning, and the scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint aroma of coffee wafted through the air. Nurses and doctors moved purposefully through the corridors, their faces a blend of exhaustion and determination. Sarah took a deep breath, grounding herself for another day of caring for her patient, Mark Stevens, who had been in a coma for the past 2 years after a tragic car accident. Sarah had dedicated herself to Mark's care during that time, forming a bond that transcended the typical patient-nurse relationship. As she walked towards his room, memories flooded her mind. Snippets of conversations she had shared with his family, the laughter of friends who came to visit, and the stories that unfolded like petals from a blooming flower. She could still hear his mother's voice, shaky yet filled with hope, recounting tales of Mark's adventurous spirit, his love for hiking, and the dreams he held tightly to his heart. "Good morning, Mark," she whispered, stepping into the dimly lit room. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors created a steady backdrop to the silence. She approached his bedside, her heart aching with the weight of his stillness. Mark lay there, seemingly untouched by time, his face peaceful, yet trapped in a world of unknowing. She reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead, her fingers lingering as if trying to bridge the gap between their worlds. "Today is going to be a good day," she said softly, her voice infused with determination. "I brought you some stories from your family. You'll love them." She settled into the chair beside him, the leather creaking under her weight as she opened a small notebook filled with anecdotes his family had shared. For the next few hours, Sarah read aloud, each word an offering of connection. She spoke about the hiking trips Mark had taken with his father, the way his friends would gather for barbecues, and the passion he had for painting landscapes as she painted these vivid pictures with. Her words, she could almost feel him there with her, sharing in the laughter, the sunsets, and the joy of being alive. As the day wore on, Sarah interacted with other nurses and doctors during her shift. The conversations often turned to Mark and his recovery, or lack thereof. She listened with a heavy heart as skepticism colored their words. "Honestly, Sarah, it's been 2 years. You can't expect miracles," one of the nurses, Lisa, said, shaking her head as she adjusted the IV drip in the adjacent room. "You should prepare yourself for the worst. Comas are tricky. Not everyone wakes up." "I know it's tough, but I believe in him," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the doubt swirling around her. "He deserves a chance. He has so much left to give." "Hope is great, but it can be dangerous too," another nurse chimed in, a hint of warning in her tone. "You don't want to set yourself up for disappointment." "Maybe," Sarah conceded, her heart racing at the thought of losing the bond they had cultivated. "But I'd rather be here, talking to him, than giving up." As the hours passed, the hospital's ambiance shifted with the setting sun. The fluorescent lights brightened, casting a sterile glow across the room. Sarah returned to Mark's side, the warmth of the day fading into a cool evening. She picked up a letter she had received from Mark's father a few days prior. It was a heartfelt message expressing gratitude for her unwavering dedication to his son. "Your kindness has been a beacon of hope for us during this dark time," the letter read. "I can't thank you enough for being there for Mark." Her heart swelled with emotion as she read the words. They were a reminder of why she chose nursing, a profession that could often feel thankless. She felt a surge of purpose, a renewed commitment to Mark's care. But just as she leaned back in her chair, a faint sound reached her ears, a soft, barely perceptible groan. Her heart raced as she leaned closer, straining to hear. "Mark?" she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. "Can you hear me?" The sound came again, this time a bit louder, a raspy, uncertain breath escaping his lips. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Mark, it's me, Sarah. You're going to be okay. I'm right here." Time seemed to stand still as she watched his eyelids flutter slightly. The monitors beeped with renewed intensity, and a rush of adrenaline surged through her veins. "Hold on, Mark. I'm going to get the doctor." She dashed out of the room, her feet pounding against the linoleum floor as she called for help. "Dr. Miller, come quickly. I think Mark is waking up." Moments later, Dr. Miller arrived, his expression shifting from confusion to excitement as they rushed back to Mark's room. Sarah could hardly contain her hope, her heart racing as they entered. Mark's eyes were still closed, but the faintest movements, the twitch of a finger, spoke volumes. "Let's take a look," Dr. Miller said, leaning over Mark's bedside. "Mark, can you hear me? If you can, squeeze my hand." Sarah held her breath, her eyes fixed on Mark's face as she willed him to respond. For a moment, everything else faded into the background: the beeping machines, the bustling nurses, the world outside. All that mattered was Mark and the possibility of him coming back to her. Then, in a moment that felt both fleeting and eternal, Mark's fingers twitched. Just a flicker, barely perceptible, but it was enough. "That's it, Mark. You're doing great," she encouraged, tears of joy brimming in her eyes. Dr. Miller's gaze met hers, a spark of hope igniting between them. "We need to monitor him closely. This could be the start of something," he said, a smile breaking through his usual calm demeanor. As they worked to stabilize his vitals and ensure he was comfortable, Sarah remained at Mark's side, her heart racing with a mix of hope and fear. In that moment, she realized that their journey was far from over. It had only just begun. The night stretched on, filled with whispered conversations and the soft hum of the hospital. Sarah settled back into her chair, the events of the day replaying in her mind. The flicker of life she had witnessed ignited a fire within her, a determination to be there for Mark as he navigated the uncertain road ahead. As she sat in the dim light, surrounded by the sounds of the hospital, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head on. For Mark, for herself, and for the bond they had formed against the odds. The journey of healing had begun, and she was ready to embrace every moment, every tiny victory. Mark's eyes fluttered open, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room. His heart raced as confusion enveloped him, a thick fog clouding his mind. He turned his head slightly, taking in the sterile environment around him: white walls, medical equipment beeping rhythmically, and the faint smell of antiseptic that hung in the air. It was unsettling, yet there was something familiar about it. Sarah, who had been sitting quietly by his bedside, felt a surge of emotion rise within her as she witnessed his awakening. Her heart leaped with joy, and without a second thought, she jumped to her feet. "Mark, you're awake!" she exclaimed, her voice trembling with excitement. She rushed to his side, gripping his hand tightly, as if afraid he might slip away again. Mark's gaze finally settled on her, and a flicker of recognition passed through his eyes. "Sarah?" he croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. It felt like a lifetime since he had last spoken, and even the sound of his own voice shocked him. "Yes, it's me. I'm so glad you're back," she responded, tears welling in her eyes. She pressed the call button frantically, her heart racing as she felt a rush of hope overwhelming her. She had waited 2 long years for this moment, and now it was finally here. Within moments, the door swung open, and Dr. Williams, the attending physician, hurried in, followed by a nurse carrying a clipboard and a few medical tools. "What's going on?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Mark is awake!" Sarah announced, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and joy. Dr. Williams rushed to Mark's side, his eyes widening as he assessed the situation. "Mark, can you hear me?" he asked, leaning closer. "Can you tell me your name?" Mark's brow furrowed as he struggled to form coherent thoughts. I think so. It's Mark," he stammered, his hand instinctively tightening around Sarah's. Good. Do you know where you are?" Dr. Williams continued, his professional demeanor unwavering, even as a glimmer of hope shone in his eyes. I'm not sure. I feel lost," Mark replied, his voice barely rising above a whisper. Sarah squeezed his hand, trying to offer comfort. "It's okay, Mark. You're in the hospital. You've been in a coma for a long time, but you're safe now." Dr. Williams nodded, glancing at Sarah with a grateful smile. "That's right. You're in New York City. We're here to help you. Just take it one step at a time." As the medical staff began to check his vitals and ask a series of questions, Sarah watched with a mix of pride and concern. Despite the chaos, she felt a profound connection with Mark, one that had deepened over the years. She longed to reach into his mind and help him navigate the labyrinth of his memories. But she knew that healing would take time. Hours passed, and as the initial excitement of Mark's awakening settled, a new reality began to dawn on him. He was still struggling to grasp the fragments of his past, the memories that felt just out of reach. With Sarah by his side, he felt a flicker of hope, but an underlying fear gnawed at him. What if he couldn't remember? What if he was forever trapped in this fog? "Sarah," he said, his voice trembling, "what happened to me? I can't remember anything." She leaned closer, her heart aching for him. "You were in a car accident, Mark. It was really bad, but you're okay now. We're going to figure this out together." "But what about my life, my family?" he queried, panic rising in his chest. "You have a family who loves you. They've been waiting for you to wake up, just like I have," she reassured him, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. Mark's mind raced as he tried to piece together the fragments of his life. Faces flitted through his mind, but they were blurred, like images seen through frosted glass. I don't remember them," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah felt a pang in her heart. "It's okay, Mark. It's going to take time. Just focus on the here and now. I'm here for you," she said softly. As days turned into weeks, Mark began to grapple with the reality of his situation. He had moments of clarity where he recalled snippets of his life, his favorite music, the scent of his mother's cooking, and the laughter of friends. But every time he felt he was getting closer to the truth, a wall of emptiness would halt his progress. One afternoon, as they sat in his room, Sarah brought him a small photo album filled with pictures of his family and friends. "I thought this might help jog your memory," she said gently, flipping through the pages. Mark stared at the images, feeling a strange mix of recognition and confusion. He pointed to a picture of a smiling woman with long brown hair. "Who is she?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "That's your sister, Emily. She's been here every day, waiting for you," Sarah explained, her voice warm. He studied the picture intently. "Emily. I think I remember her laugh," he murmured, a small smile creeping onto his face. Sarah felt a surge of hope. "That's great, Mark. You're starting to remember." As the days passed, Mark continued to piece together his life, but there was a shadow lurking in the recesses of his mind, an elusive memory that felt both familiar and unsettling. He began to recall a woman, one who seemed to hover at the edge of his consciousness. "Sarah," he said one evening, his voice laced with uncertainty, "there's someone else, a woman. I can't remember her name." Sarah's heart raced. "What do you remember about her?" she asked, leaning in closer. "Just glimpses, flashes of her face. We were together before the accident," he said, frustration evident in his tone. "Do you think she was important to you?" Sarah probed gently. "I think so, but it's all so fuzzy. It feels like I'm reaching for something just out of grasp," he replied, running a hand through his hair in exasperation. "That's okay, Mark. It's normal to feel overwhelmed. Just take your time. I'm here to help you remember," Sarah assured him, her heart heavy with compassion. Mark nodded, but the weight of his fragmented memories pressed down on him. What had happened in that moment before the crash? The thought haunted him, and he felt an urgency to uncover the truth. As he lay in bed that night, the sterile sounds of the hospital fading into the background, he closed his eyes and concentrated. He could almost see her, her hair blowing in the wind, the soft laughter that echoed in his mind. But the more he tried to grasp it, the more it slipped through his fingers. "Who are you?" he whispered into the darkness, feeling a deep sense of longing. He knew that finding her was vital, a key to unlocking all the pieces of his life. But the harder he tried, the more elusive she became. Days turned into nights, and Sarah remained steadfast by his side, encouraging him through the labyrinth of his memories. Each breakthrough felt monumental, yet the shadows of uncertainty loomed larger with each passing day. Mark was determined to uncover the truth, not just for his own sake, but for the woman who lingered in his mind like a ghost. As the morning sun filtered through the large windows of the hospital, casting soft light across the sterile room, Sarah Thompson took a deep breath, steadying herself for another day at Mark's side. The rhythmic beeping of the machines around him was oddly comforting, a stark reminder of the life that still pulsed within him, even if he was not fully aware of it yet. She adjusted the blanket covering him, ensuring he was warm and comfortable before settling into the chair next to his bed. Today was a pivotal day. Mark's family was coming to visit, and Sarah could feel the weight of the occasion pressing down on her. She had spent countless hours with Mark, sharing stories and laughter, creating a bond that felt as if it transcended the barriers of his coma. However, she knew that his family's presence would bring a different dynamic, one that could stir emotions both tender and turbulent. As the clock ticked closer to the scheduled visit, Sarah busied herself by organizing Mark's belongings on the bedside table. She meticulously arranged the small collection of cards and letters that had come from friends and family during his long hospitalization. Each note was a testament to the love and hope that surrounded him, but she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of her stomach. Just then, the door swung open and Mark's family entered. His mother, father, and younger sister, all looking weary but determined. Sarah stood to greet them, her heart aching at the sight of their drawn faces. "Hello, everyone," she said softly, forcing a smile. "He's stable, just as you left him." "Thank you for taking care of him," Mark's mother Ellen said, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been so worried." Sarah nodded, understanding the burden of worry that weighed on them. "I talk to him every day, share stories about all of you. He can hear you, even if he can't respond right now." Mark's father, Robert, stepped forward. His brow was furrowed, and the deep lines on his face told tales of sleepless nights and endless questions. "Is there any change? Any sign of him waking up?" His voice was laced with an urgency that Sarah recognized all too well. "Not yet," she replied gently, "but I believe he's still fighting. He has a strong spirit." As the family gathered around Mark's bedside, Sarah watched them closely, noting how they leaned in, whispering words of encouragement into his ear. Ellen held Mark's hand, her fingers tracing the lines of his palm, while his sister, Lily, placed a small teddy bear on his pillow, an old childhood friend she had kept all these years. "Mark, sweetheart," Ellen said, her voice trembling, "we're here. We love you so much. Please come back to us." Mark's father, however, was less patient. "He needs to wake up. We need him to wake up," he exclaimed, frustration seeping through his words. "It's been 2 years. How much longer can this go on?" Ellen shot him a look, a mix of reproach and disbelief. "Robert, please. He's trying his best. We just have to be here for him." The tension in the room thickened, and Sarah felt the need to intervene. "It's normal to feel helpless, but we must focus on supporting him," she said, her voice steady. "Mark can sense your presence. Your love will help him heal." "Love isn't enough," Robert snapped, his voice rising. "We need answers. He should be awake by now. Something isn't right." Sarah's heart sank at the raw pain in his words. She stepped forward, wanting to bridge the gap between hope and despair. "Mr. Stevens, I understand your frustration. I do. But every patient's journey is unique. Mark is fighting, and we all need to believe in him." The room fell silent, each family member lost in their thoughts. Sarah could see the conflict in Robert's eyes, a yearning for his son to return, coupled with the agony of uncertainty. She hoped her words had offered some semblance of comfort, but she knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. As the visit continued, Mark's family shared stories and memories, laughter mingling with tears as they reminisced about the past. Sarah quietly observed, feeling like a guardian of their shared history, a witness to their grief and resilience. She could see the flicker of hope in their eyes, ignited by the stories of who Mark was before the accident. "Remember the camping trip we took to the lake?" Lily said, her voice brightening the atmosphere. "He caught that huge fish, and he was so proud. We had to take a picture. Remember, Mom?" Ellen chuckled softly. "Oh yes, he wouldn't stop talking about it for weeks. I think he even tried to convince his friends to come fishing with us." Mark's lips twitched as if a smile flickered across his face. Sarah's heart raced. She hoped he could hear them. The room was filled with a warmth that transcended their sorrow, a testament to the love that anchored them all. After hours of stories and shared laughter, Mark's family reluctantly prepared to leave, their spirits lifted, but still tinged with uncertainty. "We'll be back tomorrow, Mark," Ellen whispered, squeezing his hand. "We love you." As they exited the room, Sarah felt the need to address the tension that had brewed during their visit. She turned to Robert, who lingered in the doorway, his expression still clouded with frustration. "Mr. Stevens," she said, approaching him gently, "I know this is incredibly hard for you, but please remember, he can feel your love. It makes a difference, even if it doesn't seem like it right now." Robert sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I just want him back, Sarah. I'm scared of losing him forever." "I understand," she replied, her voice softening, "but we have to trust the process. Healing takes time. Mark is in there, and we will do everything we can to help him." As the door clicked shut behind Robert, Sarah felt a pang of empathy for the family. She was aware that Mark's journey was not just his alone, it affected everyone who loved him. With renewed determination, she settled back into her chair, ready to continue her vigil by his side. In the days that followed, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to the mystery surrounding Mark's fragmented memories, particularly the elusive figure of the woman he had mentioned. Emily. Who was she? What role had she played in Mark's life? And perhaps more importantly, in his accident? One afternoon, after her shift, Sarah made her way to a nearby cafe, hoping to find some of Mark's friends. They had visited him occasionally, and she felt that they might hold clues to understanding the woman who haunted Mark's memories. As she entered the bustling cafe, the familiar scent of coffee enveloped her, and she scanned the room for any recognizable faces. She spotted a group of Mark's friends huddled at a corner table, their laughter ringing out over the hum of the cafe. Taking a deep breath, she approached them, her heart pounding with the weight of her mission. "Hey guys," she said, forcing a smile. "Do you mind if I join you?" The group looked up, surprise flickering across their faces. "Sarah, of course, sit down," one of them, Jake, said, gesturing toward an empty chair. As she settled in, Sarah felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. "I wanted to talk to you all about Mark," she began, her voice steady. "Specifically about Emily. He's been mentioning her, and I think it's important to understand their relationship." The atmosphere shifted instantly. A tense silence hung in the air, and Sarah could see the hesitance ripple through the group. "Emily, she's a complicated subject," Jake finally said, glancing at his friends for support. "Mark and Emily were close, but it wasn't always healthy." "Close how?" Sarah pressed gently. "What do you mean by complicated?" "It's just that they had their ups and downs," another friend, Mia, interjected. "They were on and off for a while. Mark loved her, but she had a lot of issues. I think it really affected him." "Like what kind of issues?" Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. "She could be really manipulative," Jake admitted, his voice low. "There were times when she seemed to play with his emotions. It was hard to watch sometimes." Mia nodded, her expression serious. I remember the night of the accident. Mark had been really stressed out because of a fight they had. He seemed distracted that whole week. Sarah felt a knot tightening in her stomach. What happened that night? Did they fight about something specific? Honestly, it was a mess, Jake replied, running a hand through his hair. They were arguing about something trivial, but it escalated. And then she started texting him while he was driving. It was like she wanted him to react, to get angry. The pieces began to fall into place for Sarah. So you think that might have contributed to the accident? Mia exchanged glances with Jake before answering. It's possible. Mark was already on edge, and then to have those messages bombarding him. It's hard to say what he was thinking in that moment. Sarah felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Anger, sadness, and a fierce sense of protectiveness for Mark. Thank you for sharing this with me. It helps me understand him better. I want to make sure he feels safe and supported as he recovers. Mark lay in his hospital bed, sweat beading on his forehead as he stirred in a restless sleep. The nightmares had started creeping in more frequently since his awakening, each one more vivid than the last. Just the night before, he had relived the horrific moment of the accident, the screeching tires, and the blinding lights. Each time he woke, his heart raced with confusion and fear. The walls of his room felt as if they were closing in on him. Sarah entered quietly, her soft footsteps barely making a sound on the linoleum floor. She had grown accustomed to Mark's nighttime struggles, and tonight was no different. She took a moment to observe him, noting the way his brow furrowed in distress, the way his body tensed as if he were bracing for impact. With a gentle touch, she placed her hand on his shoulder, and he jolted awake, his eyes wide and filled with panic. "Sarah?" he gasped, his voice hoarse from disuse. I can't stop seeing it. The accident. It won't leave me alone." Sarah sat down on the edge of his bed, her heart aching for him. "It's okay, Mark. You're safe now. It's normal to feel scared and confused. You've been through so much," she reassured him, her voice calm and soothing. "You don't have to face this alone. We'll figure it out together." Mark took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "I just wish I could remember what happened. Maybe then it wouldn't feel so overwhelming." "You will," Sarah promised, her determination shining through. "Just take it one step at a time. Right now, let's talk about something else. What do you want to do once you get out of here?" He glanced at her, a flicker of hope lighting up his tired eyes. "Maybe I can go hiking again. I miss being outside, feeling the wind and the sun, just being free." "That sounds wonderful," Sarah replied, smiling. "We'll plan a big hike together, just you and me. But first, we need to focus on your recovery. I know you can do it." As she spoke, Mark felt a warmth spread through him, a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. He nodded slowly and squeezed her hand, grateful for her unwavering support. "Thank you for being here, Sarah. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Just keep fighting, Mark. You're stronger than you think," she said, her voice filled with conviction. Later that night, after Sarah had left for the day, Mark struggled to find sleep again. The darkness loomed over him like a thick fog, and the shadows seemed to whisper secrets he couldn't grasp. He closed his eyes tightly, trying to will the images away, but they rushed back in. The screeching tires, the blinding lights, and the feeling of helplessness. Suddenly, he remembered something else. A name. "Emily," he murmured, the name slipping through his lips like a prayer. He felt a rush of emotions, memories swirling in his mind like leaves caught in a gust of wind. Who was she? Why did she haunt his thoughts? The next day, Sarah noticed the change in Mark. He seemed more agitated, restless, as if some pressing truth was on the verge of spilling out of him. During their routine conversation, he finally voiced the name that had been lingering in his mind. "Sarah, I keep thinking about Emily. I know she was important to me, but I can't remember why," he confessed, frustration evident in his voice. "Emily? Sarah echoed, her heart sinking at the mention of the mysterious woman. What do you remember about her? Not much, Mark admitted, his brow furrowing in concentration. Just bits. We were together, maybe in love, but it was complicated. I remember arguing. A lot. I think the night of the accident we had a fight. Sarah felt a pang of jealousy mixed with concern. She knew that uncovering the truth about Emily would be crucial for Mark's healing, but part of her dreaded what they might find. Mark, if you want to talk about it, I'm here. It's important to process these feelings. He looked at her, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty in his eyes. I want to remember, but what if it's painful? What if I find out something I don't want to know? Then we'll face it together, she said firmly, her resolve strengthening. You're not alone in this. Whatever it is, we can handle it. But we need to find out who Emily is and what happened that night. Okay, he replied slowly, taking a deep breath. I trust you, Sarah. Let's do it. With determination in her heart, Sarah decided to confront Emily directly. She spent the afternoon researching the woman's social media profiles, piecing together a picture of who she was in Mark's life. The more she learned, the more complicated the story became. Emily had a vibrant online presence, filled with photos of her adventures, friends, and seemingly happy moments with Mark. But there were also posts that hinted at turbulence, cryptic captions about love and loss, arguments and makeups. Once she felt prepared, Sarah reached out to Emily, arranging to meet at a cafe not far from the hospital. As she walked in, her heart raced with anticipation and dread. Would Emily be defensive? Would she reveal the truth about the night of the accident? Emily arrived moments later, a striking figure with an air of confidence that immediately made Sarah feel small. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her piercing blue eyes seemed to scan the room before settling on Sarah. Sarah, she asked, her tone curious but guarded. Hi, Emily, Sarah replied, mustering her courage. Thank you for meeting me. I'm not sure what you want to talk about, Emily said, taking a seat across from her. I know Mark's in the hospital, and I need to know what happened between you two, Sarah interjected, not wanting to waste any time. Mark is struggling with his memories, and he mentioned a fight the night of the accident. Can you tell me what happened? Emily hesitated, her expression shifting from guarded to pained. It was complicated. We were arguing about our relationship. It was a rough patch for us. Did it have anything to do with the accident? Sarah pressed, her voice steady. Were you with him? Did you distract him? No! Emily exclaimed, her voice rising with indignation. I had nothing to do with it. We were fighting, but I wasn't there when it happened. I didn't make him crash. It was an accident, Sarah. Just an accident. Sarah studied Emily's expression, searching for any signs of deceit. But you were important to him. He keeps thinking about you. What if the argument distracted him? Emily's eyes softened, and for a moment, Sarah saw vulnerability beneath the bravado. I loved Mark, I still do, but we had our issues. I never wanted him to get hurt. I was upset, but I wouldn't wish that on him. I swear. The sincerity in Emily's voice struck a chord with Sarah. She felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Mark is feeling so much guilt about the accident. He thinks he caused it. We need to help him understand that it wasn't his fault. I know, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wish I could take back that night. If I hadn't been so angry, maybe he wouldn't have been distracted. I've thought about it every day since. Sarah's heart ached for both of them, caught in a web of past mistakes and unresolved feelings. Then let's work together to help him heal. He needs the truth, Emily. He deserves to know what really happened. As they left the cafe, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be difficult, but for Mark's sake, they had to unravel the tangled threads of his memories. It wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to help him find peace amidst the chaos. Back at the hospital, Mark was waiting for her, a slight smile breaking across his face as she entered the room. "You look like you've been on a mission," he teased, trying to lighten the mood. "I have," Sarah replied, her heart racing with anticipation. "I spoke with Emily." Mark's expression shifted, a mixture of concern and curiosity. "What did she say?" "She told me about your argument. She was upset, but she swears she had nothing to do with the accident," Sarah explained, gauging his reaction. Mark stared at her, processing the information. "But what if I didn't pay attention because of her? What if I really did cause it?" "Mark, listen to me," Sarah said, placing her hand over his. "It was an accident. You were distracted, yes, but it doesn't mean you're to blame. We'll figure this out together, and I promise you we'll find a way to forgive yourself." He looked into her eyes, searching for answers, and slowly nodded. "Okay, let's do this. I want to remember. I need to." As they sat together, the weight of the past pressing down on them, Sarah felt a flicker of hope ignite once more. They were on the cusp of uncovering the truth, and she was determined to help Mark navigate the waters of his memories. Together. Mark lay on the physical therapy mat, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he struggled to complete another set of exercises. His muscles screamed in protest, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on, fueled by the unwavering support of Sarah, who stood by his side, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the storm of his recovery. "Come on, Mark. Just a few more repetitions," she encouraged, her voice steady and soothing. She leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with determination. "You've got this. I believe in you." He nodded, inhaling deeply as he attempted to push through the pain. Each movement was a reminder of the accident that had stolen so much from him, his memories, his confidence, and his sense of normalcy. Yet, with each passing day, the fog began to lift, revealing glimpses of the life he once knew, and with that came an insatiable hunger to reclaim it. As Mark completed the final repetition, he collapsed back onto the mat, panting heavily. Sarah knelt beside him, offering a water bottle. "You did amazing, seriously. I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "Thanks," he replied, taking a long sip before resting the bottle on his chest. I want to get back to my life. I want to remember everything." She nodded, her expression softening. "I know, and you will. It just takes time. You've been through so much." Mark sighed, his gaze drifting to the ceiling. "Sometimes it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle. For every memory I recover, there's 100 more that slip away." "Well, you're not alone in this fight," Sarah reminded him, her hand gently squeezing his shoulder. "We're in this together." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world outside faded away. The bond they had formed over the past few months had grown deeper, transcending the typical nurse-patient relationship. They shared moments of vulnerability, laughter, and even tears, each interaction weaving them closer together. "Do you ever think about what it would have been like if none of this happened?" Mark asked, breaking the silence. "What do you mean?" Sarah replied, tilting her head slightly. "Like, what if I never got in that car? What if I was still living my life, pursuing my dreams?" He paused, a shadow passing over his features. "Would I still be the same person?" Sarah considered his question carefully. "I think you'd still be you, but maybe you'd have a different perspective on life. Sometimes it takes something catastrophic to truly appreciate what we have." Mark nodded, her words resonating with him. "I've learned that the little things matter, the way the sun hits the trees in the morning or the sound of laughter in a crowded room. I used to take all of that for granted." She smiled warmly, her heart swelling with admiration for his resilience. "That's a beautiful realization, Mark. You're stronger than you think." Just then, the door swung open, and Mark's father entered the room, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "How's my boy doing?" he asked, his voice heavy with unspoken worries. "Just finished therapy, Dad," Mark replied, trying to inject some enthusiasm into his voice, despite the weariness that lingered. "Good. "I'm glad to see you pushing yourself," his father said, stepping closer. But there was an edge to his tone that made Sarah uneasy. "Can we talk?" Mark's father asked, his gaze flickering between his son and Sarah. "Of course," Mark replied, sitting up straighter. "What's on your mind?" His father hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "There are some things about the accident that I haven't told you, things I thought you were better off not knowing, but you deserve the truth." Mark's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "There was a car that swerved into your lane the night of the accident. I didn't want to believe it at first, but evidence suggests it might have been intentional." The air grew thick with tension, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The revelation hung over them like a dark cloud, threatening to overshadow the progress they had made. "What? Why didn't you tell me this before?" Mark demanded, his voice rising with frustration. "I wanted to protect you," his father replied, his expression pained. "I didn't want you to think it was someone else's fault. I didn't want you to carry that burden." "But I need to know!" Mark shouted, standing up abruptly, his emotions boiling over. "I have to understand what happened to me. I can't keep living in the dark." Sarah stepped in, placing a calming hand on his arm. "Mark, let's take a breath. Your dad is just trying to help." "No, he's hiding things from me," Mark snapped, his eyes blazing with anger. "Mark, please, I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together," Sarah said, her voice steady and soothing. Mark's father sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I didn't want to burden you with this, but I thought you should know. We need to investigate this further. There might be something more to your accident than meets the eye." As the weight of his father's words sank in, Mark felt a mixture of anger and determination coursing through him. "I need to remember. I need to know who was driving that car." "I'll help you," Sarah promised, her voice unwavering. "We'll find the truth. Together." Mark met her gaze, a flicker of hope igniting within him. "Thank you, Sarah. I don't know what I'd do without you." "I'm not going anywhere," she replied, her smile warm and reassuring. In that moment, Mark felt a surge of strength. He had been lost for so long, but now he knew he had allies in this fight for truth. They would uncover the mysteries of the past, piece together the fragments of his life, and, in doing so, perhaps find a way to heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon them. As they stood together, united in purpose, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time since awakening from his coma, he felt a sense of agency, a determination to reclaim his life and identity, no matter what it took. And with Sarah by his side, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Mark sat in the small conference room of the hospital, a stark contrast to the sterile white walls surrounding them. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. He felt a sense of urgency coursing through him, a need to uncover the truth behind the accident that had changed his life irrevocably. Beside him, Sarah flipped through the notes they had compiled, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Okay, so we know Emily was texting me the night of the crash," Mark began, his voice steady but filled with a hint of frustration. "But we need more than just that. There has to be something else, something more concrete that can explain why everything happened the way it did." Sarah nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I've spoken to a couple of witnesses who were nearby. They mentioned seeing a car swerving dangerously close to yours right before the impact. If we can find out who it was, that might help your case against Emily." Mark leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. The memories were still clouded, but the fragments of that night replayed more vividly now. "I remember a bright light. It was almost blinding, and then everything went dark." He clenched his fists, rage bubbling beneath the surface. "If she was trying to provoke me, she needs to take responsibility for her actions," Sarah interjected gently, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "We can't let her get away with this, not when it's impacting your life so severely." With a newfound determination, They agreed to confront Emily one last time, a decision that brought a mix of anticipation and dread. That evening, they arranged to meet her at a local coffee shop, a neutral ground where emotions could run high, but where they could also retreat if things got too heated. As they walked into the cafe, the smell of roasted coffee beans enveloped them. Mark's heart raced, each beat echoing his fear and anger. They found Emily seated at a small table, her fingers nervously tapping against her phone. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. "Thanks for meeting us," Sarah said, her voice clear and calm. "We need to talk about what happened the night of the accident." Emily shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her gaze darting to Mark. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she murmured, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. Mark leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "You were texting me while I was driving, Emily. You know that, right? You were trying to get a reaction out of me. What were you thinking?" "I was just upset," Emily shot back, her voice rising. "We had a fight, and I thought maybe reaching out would make you come back to me. I didn't mean for it to go that far." "Didn't mean for it to go that far?" Mark echoed incredulously. "I almost died, Emily. I lost 2 years of my life because of that moment. You need to understand the gravity of what you did." Sarah interjected, her tone firm yet compassionate. "Emily, it's not just about Mark's feelings. There are legal consequences for your actions, and you have to take responsibility for that. We've spoken to witnesses who saw you driving aggressively that night. You were swerving and speeding before the accident." Emily's defenses crumbled as she looked between Mark and Sarah. The reality of the situation began to settle in, and the bravado she had displayed earlier faded. I didn't realize how reckless I had been. I just wanted to talk to him, to fix things. I thought maybe if I could just get him to respond, everything would be okay." Mark felt a storm of emotions swirling inside him. Anger, hurt, confusion. "You could have killed me, Emily. Or worse, you could have hurt someone else. People don't just get to walk away from that without facing the consequences." Emily lowered her gaze, tears glistening in her eyes. "I know I messed up. I know that. But please, I'm scared. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." For a moment, silence enveloped the table. Sarah exchanged a glance with Mark, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. She took a deep breath, her voice softening. "We're not here to punish you, Emily. We want to understand and help you acknowledge what happened. You need to face this, not just for Mark, but for your own sake too." Mark watched as Emily's mask fell away completely, revealing a vulnerability he hadn't expected. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want to go to jail. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Facing the truth is the first step," Sarah encouraged gently. "You can't run away from your actions. It's going to be hard, but it's the only way to find closure for all of us." Mark felt a flicker of pity for her, despite the deep well of anger still simmering within him. "You have to tell the police the truth, Emily. You have to admit what you did. That's the only way to start making things right." Emily nodded slowly, the weight of her choices crashing down upon her. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell them everything." Her voice was barely above a whisper, and Mark could see the fight slowly leaving her. As they left the cafe, Mark felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. He had confronted the woman whose actions had altered his life forever, and yet there was no sense of victory in it. Just a hollow ache where anger had once resided. Sarah walked beside him, her presence grounding him. "You did well," she said softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "It's not easy to face someone who hurt you, especially when they're struggling too." I wanted to scream at her," Mark admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But it's hard to hate someone who's also broken. She didn't realize the consequences until it was too late." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. "And now you're one step closer to healing. You've acknowledged your pain, and you've confronted the source. That took a lot of courage." As they walked through the bustling streets of New York City, Mark felt a sense of clarity washing over him. He had faced the truth, not just about Emily, but about himself as well. In the wake of the chaos, he could begin to forgive, not just her, but himself too. A few weeks later, after Emily had turned herself in and started facing the consequences of her actions, Mark found himself sitting in a park with Sarah. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden hue over everything. "Thank you for being there for me," he said, looking over at her. "You've been my rock through all of this. I don't know what I would have done without you." Sarah smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "You don't have to thank me, Mark. I care about you. You've been through so much, and I just wanted to help you find your way back." In that moment, Mark realized how much he had grown, not only as a person, but in his relationship with Sarah. They had faced the storm together, and it had only brought them closer. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Mark took a deep breath, feeling lighter than he had in years. He was ready to embrace the future, no longer defined by his past, but rather by the strength he had found within himself and the bond he had forged with Sarah. "Let's make a promise," he said, looking into her eyes. "No matter what happens, we'll always face it together." "Together," she echoed, a smile spreading across her face, and as they walked hand in hand, the weight of the past began to lift, replaced by the hope and possibility of a brighter tomorrow.